on the clouds. Apologize. And like I said, this is a very strange Yom Ha'atzmaut. So let me just get situated. And again, we are on Facebook right now. So what?
In the Eastern time zone where you could have bread 3 hours earlier.
Well, if you follow the way in Israel, you can eat it a day before. So I'm not reformed. That's what as I said, I don't do that. But we could if you followed it. So oh yes. Oh yeah, that would be good too. I have that remote. So we can't see you guys yet. We will in a second. So I do want to tell everybody that I want to show you. This is a very strange Yom Ha'atzmaut. It will. I think, yeah, it's coming up. Yeah, it just takes a second for it to heat up. So I want to show you something that we're dealing with. So first of all, so Rachel, my oldest, so a lot of people know, went to BU, and Dina, our middle child, went to UCSD, and now Shira, our youngest, will be going to UCSD in the fall. She's heading off there in the fall to UC San Diego. So we have 3 Tritons. Now we call ourselves the Tritons. Well, she hasn't finished yet, but she's going to be there. So, but what the kids do, what Rachel has been doing, is making fun of Dina and Shira because of the protests that are going on at UCSD. Well, last week at graduation, I shared this with some people. This is what BU sent out to their. So I showed that. Pick up a mini Palestine flag for commencement, so that people would show up at graduation with that flag. So that was so. Then we Tritons turned back on Shira and said, so there you go. But I do want to show you something else, which is a little cause for concern. So the reason that I'm not going to be live tomorrow night is I'm going to an Israel festival at the JCC in Phoenix, which, by the way, you guys have been there, right? The JCC, Mike, Mary, you never went? Beautiful JCC in Phoenix. And they're having a big Israel 76 festival. And sure enough, we got an email today that pro-Palestinian protesters are showing up at the festival. Now it's a festival for kids. It's a festival for kids, and families. And the fact that now we have to worry about being able to go to an Israel festival and being harassed at the Israel festival and having security, that's a reality now. And it's something.
So everybody has guns.
That is true, Mike. Mike's just pointed out that everybody has guns. Well, it is definitely disconcerting that we now have to worry about I was going to show you what I got, which was a email or text yesterday that this is what we have to worry about now. Yeah, here it is. I'll show you. So, I mean, look, I don't know if you're a kid, from here. If you're a kid from Arizona and you're taking part in an Israel festival, and that's what your Israel festival, those are your memories of what Israel festival was for you. Here, I'll show you. It's on Scottsdale Road. Hold it a second. Yeah.
Oh, we passed it. I passed it.
It's gorgeous. It's a gorgeous building. And here's what they sent out. Here, I'm going to make it a little bit bigger so everybody can see. Yeah. This is what you have to deal with. So, this is what they're doing. So they sent this out. Remembering the genocide in 1948, Nakba Day protests Wednesday, May 15th, where? At the Jewish community campus. Right? So they put in the center, in the top right, you can see what the Jewish community sent out. That's the flyer for the JCC's event tomorrow night. And that's what they sent out to people. So that's not at a college. That's at a Jewish community center.
I just worry about Arizona. I just, because so.
But you understand what I'm saying? And look at the bottom. Can you see that?
Masks required and will be provided.
You see that?
Wow.
So you can't
They
identify.
won't show their faces.
Typical.
You understand?
All the money. Who's underwriting the cost? Yeah.
This is criminal activity, and they're encouraging people to conceal their identity so they can get away with criminal activity.
I would hope that someone sent that to the Scottsdale police.
Oh, they already know. They already know. Now, I don't know where they're going to go, by the way, because this JCC has great security, like most JCCs, metropolitan JCCs. They have great security. So they're going to be, they're not going to be able to get on. Yeah, they won't be able to get in the parking lot. But that's what they're trying to do to our Israel festival. That's at a Jewish community center, folks. That's on our property, essentially. I consider it our the Jewish community's property.
Right.
There's no difference. I want to make it clear. That is no difference that if we had an Israel festival at our synagogue, that same thing could happen. Now, I don't think it would happen in Santa Clarita. I don't, but it could. It could. And we had a rally on October 10th. We had a rally on October 10th, and some of you were there. He was there. You were there. You were there. You were there, weren't you?
Yes, I was.
And you saw what happened at City Hall. Oh, yeah, that's right. You were gone. Showed you a video of it. I sent you the video. What are you talking about? It was on Fox News. It was on Channel 11. It was on local news. Somebody came through, some knucklehead came through, a woman, by the way, came through in a car and tried to run our people over, or at least disturb what we called for. We didn't invite discussion on it. We were showing our support for Israel. And that was before Israel started anything in response. That was before the response. Israel hadn't done one thing yet, and they were already doing this. So understand that this has nothing to do with Israel's response. This has nothing to do with one civilian dying in the last 7 months, because that was 7 months ago, folks. That's what happened. So for the kids of now, this generation that are going to have to go to, and I never had that growing up. I'd go to the Walk Festival. Remember the Walk Festival over at Rancho Park? And we would go to the park and hang out with friends, and thousands of people showed up. Israeli music and food, and it was great.
And we hung out in parking lots.
This is what you'd have to deal with today. So that's what we're dealing with, folks. And that is the reality of what's happened in our lifetime. We've gone backwards. We've gone backwards, folks.
Register your name. If your name is not registered.
Yeah.
You will not be allowed in.
Really?
That's for classes, for any activity there.
The celebration there, yeah. And that's-
Ventura Boulevard.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
The valley-wide celebration.
Down there, I guess.
That's all we're showing.
I don't know, folks. I'm so disappointed.
Get it? You're not coming in?
So disappointed that little kids can't go to an Israel festival without being harassed. It crushes me. Crushes me. So, so today is Yom Ha'atzmaut, and as I said, if you want to watch what we did last night, it's up there. It's about an hour. it was exactly what we thought. Miles's attorney was on to make sure he didn't. They're a little worried about Miles because Miles is pretty passionate, but I think he was the attorney. I texted her afterwards. She was very happy with it, very, very controlled. And he got to the point, and it was what I needed to have happen, which is I wanted him to hear that. Yeah, I spoke to him afterwards, and he was very touched because, it's tough. It's tough living that ways. He's 30 this year.
No, so he did his undergrad, so he waited a while before he started his undergrad.
Guys, I was being very euphemistic when I'm telling you he had a tough time. His time was so tough. I talked to you about him. You don't remember in Buffalo, but you don't remember. I talked to him. He wanted to join the Marines and he couldn't.
He was a big macha.
He was.
From Hollywood to Buffalo. Oh, stuff out. Okay, fine. We thought he was in Florida. And so, all right, so I was trying to put together the timeline. So he waited to his mid-20s during that.
Yeah.
But he got into Columbia.
Well, he joined the IDF when he was about 20. He went in 2014. So he didn't wait as long as I thought he did. Went in at 20. And then he served for like 3 or 4 years, and then he went to Columbia in 2017 or 20. Yeah.
He did a 2-year tour.
Yeah, he did 2 years.
2-year tour in the infantry.
Yeah, and then he did, but I think he was in reserves for a couple of years while he was there. And then he came back in about 2019 to go to college.
He got into Columbia.
Yeah, he's a smart kid. Dude, kid's a smart kid.
Yeah, between high school and Columbia.
Yes.
So it's a big achievement.
Yes. Yeah, it was
Whatever we say about
10
school
yeah.
and politics, to get the gauntlet to get in.
Yes, so John's making the point that it's tough, but it sounds like Columbia tries to get people with veteran experience or something like that. It's pretty nice. Folks, we're going to,
Does he speak fluent?
Hebrew? His Hebrew's pretty good now. I mean, I haven't spoken Hebrew, but it's better. It's definitely better. He didn't know a lot of Hebrew before he went. Yes. So John just asked, can you go into the IDF without being fluent in Hebrew? Yeah, it's not easy, but he wasn't fluent when he went in 2014. And my other
English brigade.
Yeah, no, they mix these guys up. But Max Steinberg, who I talked about last night too, who was killed, he was in the one of the tough ones, the paratroopers, and he probably spoke as less Hebrew than Miles did, and they put him in a unit too. So commando unit.
Being in a stressful position, you speak to him and he'll shake.
I think there is a lot of, I think what John's point is, I think there is a lot of English that's being spoken by the soldiers, but there were Russian kids there were Israeli kids, there were kids from South America. I mean, I think a lot of them all speak English with each other, but there's kids from all over the world that are in the Israeli army. And he told me that when he was at Columbia, there was an American Jewish kid that was talking up about, like, he was making fun of Miles for not being in a commando unit. And he goes, well, what are you talking about? You're in college here. He goes, if you want to do it, go and do it now. He goes, no, I'll do it after college. And Miles said, no, do it now. Stop talking about it. Go do it now. Kid did it. He dropped out of Columbia and he went, and he's there now. He's in a commando unit right now. And Miles said to me, I said, well, that's good. You encouraged him to do it. He says, so what are you talking about, Rabbi? He said, if that guy gets killed, it's on my conscience. And I go, that's true. I didn't really think, I said, what, he wanted to go. And he said, but he didn't know when in 2020, whatever it was, 2023, when he went, that he was going to be there now. But yeah. So, but Miles was feeling very guilty. I mean, we didn't talk about it last night, but he was feeling very guilty when this war started that he wasn't there. He was feeling terrible about it. I said, look, I mean, you did your service and you didn't know. And I said, you shouldn't feel guilty about it. And he just goes, well, but these are my friends and they're serving right now because they're in the reserve units. I said, look, I said, you're finishing up. If you're done, you've got your stuff done, then do it. What I didn't know was that he was going to say what he said last night. Well, I knew it last week, he told me, but that he doesn't want to come back. I knew that already, but I didn't know that when he went back and said he was going to serve in the reserves. I didn't know he was going to say, I never want to come back to America. All right, so that's
That struck me, because as apathetic Jewish community is, which it is. sorry,
Yeah.
to tell you, in the United States, very
Yeah.
apathetic.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't see the perils. Right, I see what you're pointing out about these protests and stuff, like, I get that, and that's why you gotta follow the money and find out. Like if you really find Soros is tracking them, that's just insulting.
I don't think Soros is, I think the money that Soros gives to the organizations that then gives to these organizations, I don't think it's the money. Look, I could be naive. I don't think it's that much money that it can be funding at the level that this is happening. More importantly, I don't think it's just the funding, John. I think it's the organizational structure that's doing this. And the organizational structure that's behind it is very advanced and is very professional. And it's those people, that need to be held accountable, because those people who are doing this, they should not be able to. I'm 100% in favor of making sure those people don't have jobs. And there's a consequence, man. You can do whatever you want, but there's a consequence for it. I'm not telling people they don't have a right to free speech. They do, but they also have a right for consequences. We have a right to say to them, that was your choice, and now you're going to be held accountable for it.
Well,
We
Rabbi,
find it
don't you
offensive.
think that the masks have something to do with that and not with necessarily criminal intent?
Oh, yeah. But so you're right, Rosemary, 100%. So what they're trying to do is conceal themselves because they don't want to face
They
the
don't want to
consequences.
face the consequences of what they're doing, but
so I
that's
say-
not the
I say-
same as having a criminal intention.
Okay, so you're right on both. Yes, let me add to that: criminal intent, and also the hope that they won't be held accountable for the. You're absolutely right. Thank you for adding that. They don't want to face the consequences of being as they say, doxxed for their actions. But again, there are consequences for your actions, and everybody needs to have those consequences. I have consequences, and these people need to have consequences too. So if we're teaching young people that there aren't consequences for their actions, we're doomed. So look, like I said, if that follows their record, if somebody 20 years from now wants to apologize for the fact that they did this kind of stuff, that's up to us to do it. We've forgiven Germans for doing much worse. And so I'm not saying we don't forgive people if they made contrition or they decided, hey, I was not informed and I went along with the crowd. How many Germans were forgiven for doing that, serving in the SS or serving in the Wehrmacht, and they had no choice. We said, well, they kind of went along with it. Some people a little bit more than others, but even the people that went along with it more than others were, unless they were guilty of crimes against humanity, they didn't go to jail. So I'm not saying there's not a place for them in the future, but there's also got to be consequences for it. And there has to be contrition. If there's no consequences, there won't be contrition. So again, I'm not saying I wouldn't forgive somebody. If somebody came to me and I was hiring someone 10 years from now, and I know that they got arrested for being a part of it, I would talk to them about it and see what their feelings were about it. If they still hated Jews and hated Israel, I would probably not want those people around me. It's still my choice. I mean, I would have to decide, but at the end of the day, especially if I have a company that's, that it's important for me to have people who are loyal to the United States or that are, have a commitment towards hearing and appreciating people before killing them, then I don't want to have Hamas supporters in my company or around me. So I have a right to protect myself too, by not having people like that who I'm worried would do harm to me or have ill will to me.
California,
Not in California.
California
Well,
laws are very strict in regards to discussing politics.
I understand, but again, I could very easily see if somebody had been arrested in 2024 for a college protest. I mean, you're right. I could say, hey, where'd you go to college?
Yeah, you can do that.
All right, folks. So we're gonna jump into where we left off, which is the last half of Zechariah. And what we read up until there through chapter 7 was we read a lot about these dreams that Zechariah tells us, these dream visions. And some of them were very strange. Some of them were weird. There's 8 of them, but some of them are more clearly visions with symbols than others. But even the ones that we read about, like the menorah, which isn't a very scary or unusual thing to dream about if you're, or to have a metaphor about, there are considered dreams and dream visions. The last thing we read about was Zechariah speaking to a group of guys that come from Babylonia, and they want to know about whether they need to still keep Tisha B'Av, whether they still need to fast for Israel and the destruction of the temple. If we're rebuilding the temple, do we still do this? We're going to see this discussion continue today. And what's interesting about it is that we have that same discussion today, especially within the Orthodox world. It's not so much in the non-Orthodox world, because most Jews that are not religiously observant, I would say, don't fast on Tisha B'Av anyways. And so they never ask the question, hey, do we still fast on Tisha B'Av? Well, if you're not fasting anyways, you don't really care. It's not a question, but it isn't in the Orthodox world, because the laws of Tisha B'Av are so strict that in some cases, again, there are people who won't have weddings before Tisha B'Av during the 3 weeks between Tammuz and Tisha B'Av. They won't have weddings, which is a huge issue, by the way. Tisha B'Av is in July and August. Could you imagine not being able to have a wedding, especially, I mean, California, you don't want to have a wedding in July or August necessarily, but back east, when it's like the only time when it probably isn't going to rain, and you have 3 weeks that you can't have a wedding. I used to get the question a lot. People would ask me, would I do a wedding, during those 3 weeks? Well, I have never had an issue with it, because while I fast on Tisha B'Av, I don't observe, and I know since most people are not observing the 3 weeks, I don't have an issue with it. During those 3 weeks, there are people who are very strict about it. Judith just came on the line. We're talking about Tisha B'Av and the 3 weeks. There are people that will not swim during that period, or from the 1st of Av to the 9th of Av. For those 9 days, they won't swim. But some people don't swim all the way from Tammuz to Av, to the beginning of Av.
It's the only Jewish holiday during summer camp.
During summer camp, can you imagine not being able to swim at summer camp? Can you imagine not being able to swim at the beach? There are people in Israel who will not go to the beach for that period of time, either the 3 weeks or 9 days. And so there's a discussion in Israel specifically, again, amongst the more religious Zionists, especially people who love Israel and say, look, I'd like to go to the beach. And by the way, especially people that will go to the beach. There are some Jews who won't go to the beach because they won't go out in immodest attire. But if you could go to the beach and you're having this discussion, do we still have to, in Israel, in a modern nation of Israel that's being rebuilt, do we still have to follow these laws? Judith, you've heard this, right? You've probably had family discussions about this for some of your more observant family, right? Hello?
Yes, sorry. Yeah. They're none of them that I believe, because the most observant are the ones in Israel. And I think it's just that they just do the 9 days. I think they swim the rest of the time. Not positive, but but it's Israel. They're in Israel, so the rules kind of are different.
Yeah, and some people in Israel have gotten, some of the Orthodox rabbis have become a little bit more lenient in saying some of these laws are not in effect. But this all goes back to Zechariah. And for 2,000 years, it was never discussed. Nobody ever talked about it because the idea of this happening was so far-fetched. And I do want to say today, especially on Yom Ha'atzmaut, is that, again, when we went back and have started rebuilding Israel, there was a section of Jews, especially religious Jews, who said, we're not supposed to do that. The Messiah is supposed to do that. We're not supposed to do that. And so there were some people, including the Neturei Karta today, those Orthodox Jews that you see that are marching with Hezbollah and with Hamas and that are supported by Iran, who say that Israel is illegal that only the Messiah can establish it. And so what Israel does today goes against Jewish law. They'll say something to the effect that Zionism is antithetical to Judaism. So there'll be
Did you-
signs like that, even in Israel, in Mea Shearim, for the areas that are controlled by the Neturei Karta, which are a subsection of the Satmar. They're not all Satmar, there are only some Satmar that are Neturei Karta, but they look like other Satmar Hasidim. And you'll see them again, whenever you see these Orthodox Jews marching with anti-Israel protesters, especially today, those are Neturei Karta, who are Orthodox, ultra-Orthodox Jews, but who believe that. Again, the whole concept of Israel being established as a nation is a fairly new idea. When people say, well, why didn't Israel get established for 2,000 years? Partly because we believed only the Messiah could do it, but also partly the whole concept of a nation only goes back about 200 years, until the United States, until France, had the Age of Enlightenment. The whole concept of having a nation, no one ever talked about a nation. Like, what's a nation? You have a king, you have a territory. Okay, but a nation, a country that defines itself with a language, with a culture, all of these ideas came out of the Age of Enlightenment. These were not things that people talked about 1,000 years ago or 1,500 years ago. The only way that Israel could have been established in our minds was by the Messiah. And that's because that's the last time it happened. And there were no nations. Nobody had a nation. It wasn't like there was a nation. There was no nation. There was an empire, there was a kingdom, there was a fiefdom, whatever, but there was no nation. So that concept was not there. And so when Theodore Herzl started talking about the nation of Israel, people said, well, that's an amazing idea. Yeah, because Herzl knew about nationalism. And who knows? There's people who have a theory that one day we're not going to have nations anymore, that we'll go back to a time, we'll go back to either empires or to blocks or to some people dream of a confederation of states will not be
International, interstellar
the
federations.
federation of planets one day, right? So people have those dreams still of that, but that's also partly because, again, there was also this is still new for us. So when people talk about, like when we read Zechariah, they're like, oh, they're talking about the nation of Israel. No, they're talking about Zion and the Jewish people coming back to Jerusalem and back to Israel. But the whole concept of it being a nation wasn't really an issue. And the fact that they were under Persian control, not surprising. And also, by the way, not that problematic. The Persian king was their king, but they got to live in their land and they had autonomy and they got to worship the way they wanted to. And they didn't expect anything more. This was enough for them, we think. Well, let's read it. Let's take a look at it and you'll talk and you can then frame that. But I want you just for a moment, step outside of your preconceived notion that there's nations, that there have to be countries, that everyone has a flag, and that they all march at the Olympics. That's a relatively new idea, folks, in human history. So just step out of that for a second and don't think about it in those terms, because they couldn't have imagined that there would one day be a flag of Israel and that there would be a country with a team and an airplane with a flag that flies tourists there, and a flag on a jet that defends Israel flying around in F-16s. Those ideas, they couldn't even conceive them. So let's take a look at chapter 8. That's where we're going to start. Rosemary, if you would be so kind as to read for us Zechariah.
The word of God of hosts came to me. Thus said God of hosts, I am very jealous for Zion. I am fiercely jealous for her. Thus
By
said,
the way, that's an interesting phrase, because it's not even translated fully. It says, the Lord of hosts says, I am jealous for Zion. I am really jealous for Zion. And so they didn't translate something there.
I see Gadola out there a lot.
Yeah, twice, right?
Mhm.
So Mary, read me your translation. Read me the King James.
Jealous for Zion, great jealousy, and I was jealous for her with great fury.
Yeah. So they didn't translate the word chema. Chema gedolah, and then kaniti la. So the word kaniti is actually used, which is the word, or kina is the word for jealous, is used 1, 2, 3 times. So they translated it, well, I'm really jealous, right? I'm jealous for her. I'm jealous for Zion. This is the way it really should be translated. Thus said the Lord of hosts, Adonai Tzvaot, kaniti latzon. I am jealous or zealous, could also be zealous, by the way. I am passionate, also could be it. I'm passionate for Zion. Kinagedolah, I'm really passionate. I have a great passion for Israel. That's what it says. V'chema gedolah. And however you're going to translate chema, which is fury or passion or exuberance, I have great exuberance and energy for Israel. Kaniti la, I am jealous for her. All of that is there. And that's not translated. But it shows you, again, God's energy and passion and protection of Israel. And again, it's all there, and they didn't translate it. And even the King James didn't fully translate it. You get the point, but it's really, really there. That word kana is used 3 times. And again, we know the phrase El Kana. It's right there in the 10 Commandments. I am a jealous God. I'm a protective God, which means I'm jealous for you, almost again, the way a husband is for a wife.
Thus said God, I have returned to Zion, and I will dwell in Jerusalem. Jerusalem will be called the city of faithfulness, and the mount of God of hosts, the holy mount. Thus said God of hosts, there shall yet be elderly men and women in the squares of Jerusalem, each with staff in hand because of their great age. And the squares of the city shall be crowded with boys and girls playing in the squares. Thus said God of hosts, though it will seem impossible to the remnant of this people in those days, shall it be also be impossible to me, declares God of hosts.
And that's the powerful line here. You're going to see seniors walking around. You're going to see kids playing. Yeah. So when people walk around Jerusalem today, especially the old city, and you see people walking around there, and you see the elderly there sitting on a bench, walking around, it's cobblestones that are real dangerous. I'm always thinking, oh man, that guy's going to fall. He's going to trip, break a hip. Or you see the kids running around making noise. How do you not read that, what we just read, and understand that we're living in miraculous times? Because our ancestors for thousands of years couldn't imagine this. And it's happened again. So when Zechariah said it, it was coming back after the Babylonian destruction, and it was only 70 years later. And it must have been pretty moving for his audience to hear, we're coming back. We're going to be back. But it was only 70 years. This was 2,000 years to be able to have this happen. So how do you not process that, especially today on Yom Ha'atzmaut? How do you not process that? And again, I'm not saying you have to say it's a miracle. I'm not saying you have to say, God did it. I'm not saying that. But there is no way to say that the times we live in are not mind-blowing, at the very least. Because it was 2,000 years that have come to now the point where this can happen. And again, there are people that are trying to take it away from us. So let's take a look at the big question, by the way, what happens now with this? Because we come back, but what happens now?
Thus said God of hosts, I will rescue my people from the lands of the east and from the lands of the west, and I will bring them home to dwell in Jerusalem. They shall be my people, and I will be their God, in truth and sincerity.
Yep. And again, this is a relationship, right? A relationship like, and we've heard it in Micah and Isaiah and in other texts, Hosea, that I will be their God in truth and sincerity, in emet v'tzedek. Emet, in this case, utzvaka. This is a relationship built on trust, built on faith.
Thus said God of hosts, take courage, you who now hear these words that the prophet spoke when the foundations were laid for the rebuilding of the temple, the house of God of hosts. For before that time, the earnings from labor were nil and profits from livestock were nothing. It was not safe to go about one's business on account of enemies, and I set every person against someone else.
So what's implied here, folks? Because you're reading the text, but what's not being said here? Rosemary, what's not being said here? Take courage. That the prophet spoke, take courage, right?
Right.
It means that people are not taking courage.
Right. People are afraid.
Yeah. And so Zechariah, as we said kind of a couple weeks ago when we started Haggai and Zechariah, this period, Haggai and Zechariah's job is to tell people, stop waiting around. It's time to get busy. There is no time like right now. This is when it's going to get done.
And don't wait till the economy crashes again.
Did you hear that, John? Don't wait for the economy to crash before you get involved. Get busy. That's good words of advice. Folks, he's giving people a kick in the butt because they're not working. They're not doing it. They're not getting down to creating the temple, rebuilding it. And part of the argument is, well, we can't build it like the last time. Okay, fine. But we can do something. Well, we don't have the money. And he just said to them, the other thing that's implied here, you're not doing well. And the reason why your crops aren't growing is because you didn't build a temple. Build a temple, and again, we talked about it before, it's the prosperity gospel. Build it, and they will come. Well, build it, and God will come. But it's good for business. It's not just the right thing to do. It's going to be helpful for you. Okay? And it's the right time to do it.
But now I will not treat the remnant of this people as before, declares God of hosts, but what it sows shall prosper. The vine shall produce its fruit, the ground shall produce its yield, and the skies shall provide their moisture. I will bestow all these things upon the remnant of this people.
Yeah, and that's again the Sharit Ha'am or Sharit Yisrael. Sure, the remnant.
Your prosperity gospel right there.
Yeah, that's it. So there might not be a lot of you left, which is also part of the implication here, which is you're a remnant, right? There was a whole lot of you before, and there's not that many, but we're going to do it. And by the way, that motif of the remnant, we need to say too, that's part of Israel's modern day, right? Modern day myth, legend. I mean, it's a fact. We talk about the fact that in the 1940s, a lot of the people that came in that next wave were survivors. They were the remnant of their people. We talked about it when we laid to rest last year, Eddie's mother, Mina, the only one of her family that survived. She was one of 5 people, her parents and her 2 sisters. She was the only one who survived. And she came to Israel. She met Eddie's dad in a DP camp in Cyprus because she tried to sneak into Israel and the British stopped her in 1946. How's that not the remnant of Israel? 1 out of 5. 1 out of 10 from Poland on average survived. 300,000 out of 330,000 survived Poland. 3,300,000. So 300,000 out of 3,300,000, about 3.5 million survived. You had about a 90% chance of being murdered if you were Jew in Poland in 1939. 1 out of 10 people walked out of that country. So some of them walked, some of them got on a boat, some of them walked for miles to get to Israel, to get to a port so they could get to Italy or wherever to get on a boat. Yeah, how's that not the remnant of our people? So that's what he was talking about. You can imagine those people saying, there's only a fraction of us now. How can we do anything? Because most of us died. It's not an experience that we felt as American Jews, that our parents and grandparents felt. I mean, they felt it for their families that were left behind. They felt it for their people, but they didn't live it. They didn't feel like we're the only ones left. They did.
And just as you were a curse among the nations, O house of Judah and house of Israel, so when I vindicate you, you shall become a blessing. Have no fear, take courage. For thus said God of hosts, just as I planned to afflict you and did not relent when your ancestors provoked me to anger, said God of hosts, so at this time I have turned and planned to do good to Jerusalem and to the house of Judah. Have no fear. These are the things you are to do. Speak the truth to one another, render true and perfect justice in your gates. Not a single one of you shall contrive evil against another, and do not love perjury, because all those are things that I hate, declares God.
And so you can see what he says is, look, when you come back, just treat each other right. Don't cheat each other. Be loyal to each other. Be truthful with each other. Just be honest. And when he talks about what is going to happen now, that's what's going to happen now. We're not going back to the way we behaved last time. We got to do better. That's the only way we can survive in this country, is by treating each other right, doing the right thing. So these guys came and said, are we still supposed to fast? Oh, well, Zechariah just kind of said, what do you got to do? Don't worry about fasting. Worry about how you treat each other. The comment that I just said is, there's a reason why I said that.
And the word of God of hosts came to me, saying, thus said God of hosts, the fast of the 4th month, the fast of the 5th month, the fast of the 7th month, and the fast of the 10th month shall become occasions for joy and gladness, happy festivals for the house of Judah. But you must love honesty and integrity.
So you see what I'm saying? They want to know whether we still have to follow these sad days. And Zechariah finally gets to the point here that we saw last week, which is, no, those can be happy days, but you got to be good. You have to love honesty and integrity. You have to love shalom. The shalom ehavu. You've got to love shalom and emet and truth, right? So these holidays, there's a precedence for these holidays turning into days of joy. Did they turn into days of joy during his time, during the time that they're asking? It's not clear, by the way, because when the temple was destroyed by the Romans on the same day, which, by the way, that wasn't a coincidence. It wasn't God necessarily acting, because the people that started the fire that burned the temple that day, the Zealots, in 70 of the Common Era, right, about 2,000 years ago, those people fighting the Romans, they set the fire themselves that day. They created essentially Tisha B'Av being celebrated again, commemorated again, marked as a day of Jewish national tragedy. Would it have been burned down anyways? Perhaps. Did they force it by creating the situation for it to, and again, for lighting the fire, literally lighting the fire that did that? Who knows? So it's not a coincidence when people say, well, God destroyed the temple twice. Well, yes and
God
no.
help.
The Babylonians did it the first time, and we did it the second time on that day. And there was definitely the possibility that the intention was to create this. Did the people who burned the temple down, the Jews, the Zechariah who burned the temple down, and by the way, we know about this because Josephus wrote about it. It wasn't, and to some extent, the Jews wrote about it too, because the Talmud talks about how they were fighting each other. They were killing each other in Jerusalem during this siege. But there's an interesting thing that you could also ask yourself. In a billion years, in a billion thoughts, did the Jews who lived during the Roman era ever think that it would take 2,000 years for us to come back and rebuild it? Absolutely not. They thought maybe it'll be another 70 years. Maybe it'll be 50 years. You know how we know that? Because there was the Bar Kokhba revolt in 135, which was 65 years later. Do you think that was a coincidence? No, because Jews said it takes about 70 years or so for God to calm down. The last time God calmed down took about 70 years. Babylonians destroyed it. Persians let us rebuild it. There was a vacuum for a few years where Jews thought that maybe we could get our freedom again, and they started the Bar Kokhba revolt. It turned out that Hadrian, for all his weirdness, and Hadrian definitely had some weirdness, he was a really good commander. And he ended up undoing some of the mistakes that had happened over the last 30 or 40 years. And he was able to quell the rebellion and eventually kill lots of Jews and put down what was the last rebellion. But Jews didn't think that it would take 2,000 years for them to rebuild. Never. Yeah, John, you were saying. Okay, so let's talk about it. So these days, the fourth month, the fast of the fourth month, the fast of the fifth month, which is Tisha B'Av, I already talked about, the fast of the seventh month, and the fast of the 10th month. These are all fasts that are around the destruction of the temple. They're all about the end of our sovereignty, right? These different fasts are all connected to, and when it says, you can read about it in Kings, right? Well, for example, the fast of the seventh month, this little dealie that they're talking about right here, this is the fast that we talk about, which is the fast of Gedaliah. When the Jews killed Gedaliah, who was the Babylonian representative, a Jew, the Jews of Jerusalem killed him. They killed him. They struck him down. And then the people who killed him ran away. And of course, the Babylonians lost their minds after that. So that's not technically the temple being destroyed. The temple was already destroyed at that point. Or again, the Babylonians had already, it's still a fast day. It's the day right after Rosh Hashanah. By the way, the reason that it's then is because Gedaliah was killed on Rosh Hashanah. You can't fast on Rosh Hashanah, so the next day after you fast. But the fast of Gedaliah was connected to, again, so we have the fast of Tammuz, which I said is the one that is here, the fast of the 10th month, the fast of which one did I miss? The fast of the 17th of Tammuz and the 10th of Tevet. And the 10th of Tevet, again, was when the walls of Jerusalem were breached. All of these, so three of them are connected completely to the destruction of the temple. The 10th of Tevet, the 17th of Tammuz, and Tisha B'Av. All of those dates had to do with when Jerusalem was destroyed. And the fast of Gedaliah was because Gedaliah was kind of like the final straw, if you will. And so all of those days are fasts traditionally. If you look them on a calendar, you'll see them all together on the calendar. You'll see those dates. They'll say a fast day, and you'll be like, I never heard of that day. And the reason is, again, most Jews today don't keep those fast days. I don't know
Do
what
you
to
know
tell.
a modern day book that talks about this? A good one about Kokhba revolt and
The Bar Kokhba revolt. It's a good question. It's a good question, a good historical account of it. Let me think about that, Gail.
thank you.
The Bar Kokhba revolt has been well documented archaeologically. So Yigal Yadin wrote a really great, it's a coffee table book a compendium of the archaeological finds that we made that testify to the Bar Kokhba revolt, which again was about 65 years after the temple was destroyed. It was about 100 years after Jesus, the time of Jesus. I was going to say Jesus when Jesus was.
Haven't they discounted
defined.
a lot of what he said in that book? That it wasn't archaeological, that it was very
They've gone
motivated?
back and forth on it, Gail.
Okay.
The issue is that Yadin was the archaeologist who identified Masada. He identified a lot of the Bar Kokhba age finds, especially the cave of sorrows, the cave where they found a lot of stuff that was from people who were hiding out during the Bar Kokhba revolt, and then he also excavated a city called Hatzor, which is from the first temple period, from the time of Solomon. So he was a part of those excavations. Some of the claims that he made, some people have said were not true, but actually we kind of go back and forth on some of the stuff that he identified. But for the most part, they haven't been no one's disqualified the books, but he was very important during the 60s, Yigal Yadin, and he was also Moshe Dayan's father-in-law, I can't remember. He was somehow related to Moshe Dayan. And so these guys were involved in the not only the archaeology of Israel, but kind of the establishment of the Jewish people as the returnees to their historical. So I'll tell you now, he was chief of the IDF. So he was not only an archaeologist, but he was there. I can't remember. Anyways, but he was one of the military leaders of Israel, but also an archaeologist. So, anyways, I will look for a book though that's a good account of Bar Kokhba revolt. But back to the text. These festivals, these fasts will all be turned to festivals. They'll be turned to times of joy. So there is a biblical basis for taking the days that we've traditionally had as days of sadness. So what does the modern day Israel say about it? Well, like I said, some rabbinic authorities in Israel have said we have to relax some of those things. And even for Jews in America, that maybe we fast on Tisha B'Av, but to recognize that Israel's been reestablished, maybe we can swim, during those 3 weeks, or maybe we can swim, but we don't swim from the 1st of Av to the 9th of Av, but we can swim before that. So people have tried to kind of say that maybe we should do stuff to recognize the miracle of modern day Israel. So let's continue.
Thus said God of hosts, peoples and the inhabitants of many cities shall yet come. The inhabitants of one shall go to the other and say, let us go and entreat the favor of God. Let us seek God of hosts. I will go too.
So now, this, you could say that these are Jews, but you can see that they are not only Jews.
The many peoples and the multitude of nations shall come to seek God of hosts in Jerusalem and to entreat the favor of God.
Yeah, and so there it says quite clearly that these are many nations, and these are goyim, these are the nations.
And this is 65 years before Bar Kokhba.
No, this is
They didn't mean by nations what we mean by nations.
no, but exactly. Well, that's a good point. No, this is 500 BCE. This is 600 years before that. So what's interesting about this, John, is that it did happen during the time of Jesus. It did happen before that, where we know that multitudes of people were becoming Jewish. And was it to the extent that Zechariah is talking about it? Well, it's difficult to know. But there were definitely peoples during this time and after this that were, and it wasn't just individuals. It wasn't just it wasn't just a random guy. And I'll show you, actually, this is one of the more interesting peoples that you've never heard of, probably, because this is not history that they usually teach. This was a kingdom in the Middle East. You can see where it was located in modern day Iran and Armenia and Iraq, because this area of Arbel is there, and Nineveh, you can see that's Mosul. So this is an area called Adiabene. And Adiabene was a kingdom there. And you can see that it was one of these kingdoms that kind of grew up after the Greek generals of Alexander had been kind of come to an end. It says again their formation is a little unknown, but this is an area around Armenia. Okay, look at this right here. Adiabenian rulers converted to Judaism from paganism around the 1st century of the Common Era. Queen Helena moved to Jerusalem, where she built palaces for herself and her sons, Isates, Bar of Monabaz, and Monabaz II. They donated large funds for the Temple of Jerusalem. That is during the Roman period. Again, these were Persian, Iraqi, Armenian kinds of people that became Jewish. I mean, you never heard of them, but they were. So this happened during this period. And this wasn't the only time that this happened in history, but these were people who became Jewish. It was a random nation. Again, didn't necessarily happen a lot, but it did happen. And it happened, and most people don't talk about it. But these were nations that converted, or the leaders of the nations converted to Judaism. And we have a very interesting example of it happening in the area of Yemen, the Himyar kingdom. We also have the more famous one of the Khazars who converted, and that was many, many years later. That was about 700 of the Common Era. That was during the Byzantine period, the early Middle Ages. The Khazar kingdom also converted to Judaism. That's why when you hear people saying that we're not really Jewish, that we're descendants of Khazars who converted to Judaism 700, we're not the original Israelites, which you've heard from some of the people that are protesting right now, that we're not real Hebrews. So that, again, is a way of disqualifying us from having a biblical homeland. It was a theory that was put forward in the 1950s, and there's no basis for it. Genetically, there's no basis for it. But because it was put forward at a certain point, people have still bought into it. And again, in the 1950s, they didn't have genetic studies like they do today. So in all fairness, it was weird. It was a weird theory, but it was a theory, and it made its way into strange places, including Black Israelites who claim that they're the real Jews and that we're descendants of Khazars who converted. Again, there's no basis for it, but people still talk about it. So are there people who have ancestry from there? Sure. There's that Jewish people have ancestry from every place. But this is an interesting idea, and it definitely happened on a small scale, and it also happened on a large scale. And here's the last piece of that.
Thus said God of hosts, in those days 10 people from nations of every tongue will take hold. They will take hold of every Jew by a corner of their cloak and say, let us go with you, for we have heard that God is with you.
Yeah. It's a wild thing. It's a wild thing. I hear that from Christians all the time. I don't know if they've taken hold of my clothes, but the idea that they're going to hang on and they're going to say, take us with you. 10 nations, right? 10 people from the nations, from the Goyim. 10 of those people, right? It says right there.
You know what's interesting to me,
Yeah.
and I may have missed it, maybe, but when I go back, because you have to go back.
Yep. Yep.
If you go back, there's not a lot written about Three Stooges. And, right, because we were all born, right, correct me if I'm wrong, the theory is. we were
By the
all
way,
born
John's
together,
asking about the three stooges being Shem, Ham, and Yafet, the three sons of Noah.
we were
Yes.
all born Jews.
Yes. Well, we weren't. We were all born of Noah, but Noah wasn't Jewish.
Well.
He wasn't. Abraham's the first Jew. So he's 10 generations before. He's our ancestor, but he's also the ancestor essentially of every human. So we have two ancestors, right? We have Adam and Eve, and then we have Noah and his wife. But we have like two ancestors, two phases. And then for Jews, we have Abraham and Sarah as our ancestors. And anyone who converts to Judaism becomes the son or daughter of Abraham and Sarah. That's what we say. We don't say you're the son of Noah. By the way, there is a group, we've talked about them, the Noahides, who are Gentiles who have not formally converted to Judaism, but yet have an association with Judaism and want to be like this. They look at these lines from Zechariah and they're very, very, I've spoken to some of them before. These are Bible Belt Christians. The Noahides are Bible Belt Christians. So John, when you say that this goes back to Noah, you're not far wrong.
But my question is, it's just not a lot, what was Noah then? But if humanity pretty much descended from those three fellows,
Yeah.
right? Because it's all very gray and you're trying to interpret it. I'm trying to see what the sages over the years have come up with. You can't just, I guess they can just fill it in with what they think happened or they wanted to happen. Right? So you're saying that they're all the nations. Well, shoot, to me, all the nations were descendants of them, and they were all Jewish because they're descendants of Abraham and Sarah. So now all of a sudden, where did their change happen? This is prior to Jesus.
Yes.
And Christianity and Islam.
Yes, because there were pagans who did it too. Here's the Noahide Center. This is one of the Noahide centers.
If this is going to make sense to me, right?
Well, look,
I need to fill this in with facts.
Well, you can't go back 3,000 years later and get facts. It's tough. You can't. Well, I wouldn't say it's impossible. We have genetics. We don't have much else. We have a little archaeology and we have genetics. But these are primarily Christians who've decided, again, look what the quote is from Isaiah, for out of Zion, ki mitzion tetzeh Torah, right? Also the line from Micah, right? We said it's in Micah as well. That wonderful line. But here's some of the books that you can get if you want to be part of the Noahide movement. So Jewish people have encouraged Noahide so these are, no, you're not, because it's not huge yet. Will it be huge? I don't know, but these are Noahides, and there are different groups. There's not one. Of course, there's different Noahides. Of course, they're asking for donations here. But if you look at communities, I'm going to show you. See, I'm not sure where these ones are located. I don't see. They don't even have a. I don't even see them with the communities there.
Does anybody else online or on this class, does anybody think the way I think? Am I so far off?
What about what?
All these nations, where did all these nations come from? At what point did they decide that Judaism wasn't right for them?
Well,
Right, because if we're all descendants from Adam and Eve and Abraham and Sarah, or Abram and Sarah.
Yeah. So John, your question is why did people not follow along the way?
How did they get off the beaten track?
We've been asking that question for a long time. The issue, to some extent, So Jews had to ask that question because you're looking at it from the vantage point, if that's what the Torah says, right? The Torah says that we should all know better, and we don't. But you could also make the argument that Israel is a little backwater of the Middle East. Israel's never had tremendous, the country was never that large. There were never that many people in Israel. So how would people have known? How would people in China have known? The weird thing is, John, the weird thing is that Christianity, no one would have thought that a offshoot of Judaism would become the religion that would eventually have a huge impact on the whole world. Look, I don't know. I don't know what the future holds for religion and for Judaism in particular. At one point, Buddhism was a offshoot of Hinduism, and there are more people that are Buddhist today than there are Hindu. I mean, sometimes the offshoot becomes bigger than the original product. I mean, I don't want to say that you can make the argument that Hinduism and Buddhism have the relationship that Judaism and Christianity have, but because there are a lot of similarities in that relationship. Buddhism was started by an individual in particular who had a following and who was venerated by his subjects, the Buddha. Christians had Jesus, who was venerated by his followers. Buddha reformatted a lot of ideas of key ideas of Hinduism, and in this concept that we can achieve enlightenment in one nirvana in one lifetime. Well, that whole concept of nirvana only exists because of Hinduism. So there's a lot of similarities that what Christianity did to Judaism, taught people the Bible. But who knows? I mean, I'm sure Hinduism has that discussion sometimes, like, how did Buddhism get bigger than us, right? We're the original. So I don't know. But I will tell you that we don't know what the future holds. And we do know that when you look at the Bible, and when Noahides have looked at the Bible, look, we never imagined that Israel's size, which is still relatively small at 9 million people, would have an outsized impact on the rest of the world. How does a country that has the same population as, metropolitan Los Angeles have so much control and have so much outsized power? And again, how does somebody with a computer can make a lot of waves, can make a lot of noise? So I don't know. I mean, I'm not sure what the future holds. I don't, but I know that there are ingredients that are in play here that could do kind of pretty wild things. And again, what is God going to do, right? So that's the other question, right? Is this all part of God's plan? I don't know. So here, let's take a look at chapter 9, though. We're going to read a little bit more, specifically, again, to these people who are not living in the land of Israel at the time, 2,500 years ago. So here we go.
A pronouncement, the word of God. God will reside in the land of Hadrach and Damascus, for mortals will turn their eyes to God like all the tribes of Israel, including Hamath, which borders on that land, and Tyre and Sidon, though they are very wise. Tyre has built herself a fortress. She has amassed silver like dust and gold like mud in the streets. But my sovereign will impoverish her. Her forces shall be defeated at sea, and she herself shall be consumed by fire.
So again, this is specifically about the nations that surround Israel, Syria and Lebanon. In those days, again, Hamath, which is in part of Syria. It still is a city in Syria, Hamath. Tyre and Sidon, which are near Beirut, the big port cities for the Phoenicians. And they're really powerful now, but God's going to reduce them to nothing. Those places are super powerful. They have a great wall around their cities. And again, these cities ended up within about 150 years being conquered by Alexander the Great. They were destroyed. They were demolished. And Alexander the Great, by the way, that was a great military campaign that he had against Tyre and Sidon, because he had to essentially cut them off. If you want to read about how Alexander the Great captured those cities, it's an interesting, they've done documentaries about Alexander that show how he did it, but it's exactly what the Bible says was going to happen. And it happened during that time. Take a look at this line.
Ashkelon shall see it and be frightened. Gaza shall tremble violently, and Ekron at the collapse of her hopes. Kingship shall vanish from Gaza. Ashkelon shall be without inhabitants, and the mongrel people shall settle in Ashdod. I will uproot the grandeur of Philistia.
Yeah. So that's clearly against the Philistines. That's the Philistines. All of their big cities, Ekron and Gaza and Ashdod and Ashkelon. Of course, that line, though, makes us wonder, what times do we live in? Gaza tachil me'od. Gaza will violently tremble. Holy moly. It's in the Bible. That's in the Bible, my friends. Melech HaAza. There's not going to be a king in Gaza anymore. Wow. Whew. Now, Ashkelon at the time was inhabited by the Philistines. Ironically, Ashkelon is the closest big city to Gaza, to the area of Gaza. And Ashkelon is definitely, including even in the last days, there was a rocket launched at Gaza, from Gaza to Ashkelon. But it's definitely not without, it's not without inhabitants, but it's definitely suffered during this last time, these last days. Ashdod's a little further up. By the way, mongrel people, it's not a great translation. It's the Hebrew of mamzer. And you've heard the word mamzer because we used it in Yiddish a lot. It's one of those words that made its way. But mongrel sounds like the person, like they're dogs. But it is what a mongrel kind of is when we talk about dogs like that, because what's the translation you have, Mary? Yeah, a mamzer is a bastard. And when you hear, two old Yiddish, guys speaking in Yiddish going, that guy's a mamzer, that's what they meant. The guy's a bastard. We had a word for it. We use the word all the time. We don't literally mean the guy's a bastard. We don't mean he's a unknown biological creation, right? We don't know who his parents are. That's what the word means, but we don't always mean it that way. He probably meant it a little bit closer to its intended original meaning, which is some mixed race people. They ain't going to be Philistines anymore, though. There'll be a mixed race folk that'll live there in Ashdod. Okay. So, the pure-blooded Philistines, they're not going to be there anymore. It's a city of mamzers now. Again, that's what mamzer means. And again, we don't always mean it that way. We don't always intend it to mean that way, but same as in English, same as in Hebrew and Yiddish, that's what it literally means. Somebody who's not, we don't really know who their parents or their dad is yet.
But I will clean out the blood from its mouth and the detestable things from between its teeth. Its survivors too shall belong to our God. They shall become like a clan in Judah, and Ekron shall be like the Jebusites.
What it just said is that the Philistines are going to become Jewish. That's what they just said. I'm going to make them Jewish. All that stuff that they used to eat, like pork, whatever they're eating, whatever crazy Philistine diet stuff. They're going to be like Jews. They're going to be like the Jebusites. Remember the Jebusites? Those were the people that lived in Jerusalem that were Canaanites who married into our people and became us. Some of the Canaanites became Jews. The Bible just told us that, by the way, in case you didn't believe it. In case you didn't know what happened to the Jebusites after David took the city from them, by the way, and didn't kill them. When David made Jerusalem the capital, he took it from the Jebusites. It said so in the Bible. It said so in the book of Samuel. And he didn't kill them. And the Bible just told us what happened to them. 400 years later, that was 1000 BC. This is 500, 600 BC. It just told us they became Jews. And guess what? The Philistines are going to become like Jews too. That's what it just said. Yep.
And I will encamp in my house against armies, against any that come and go, and no oppressor shall ever overrun them again. For now I have taken note with my own eyes.
Yeah, unfortunately, that didn't happen.
No. It's interesting. Looking at these last three sections, I wonder how much this is reflected on in Israel. In the power that people make decisions.
Okay.
How
Yeah, so John asked the question, how does this play out for the people who are making decisions in modern day Israel. Well, Netanyahu is definitely more biblically inclined than his predecessors. That's true. Well, how do I know? Because he just said so. When they just talked about what are you going to do without these weapons, he said, do you remember what he said? We'll fight with our fingernails. We'll fight with our fingernails. That was the quote he used. He knew what he was saying. Yeah, we'll fight with our fingernails. And he knew what he was saying. But he also said, we have a lot more than fingernails. And he said, also, with God's help, we're going to defeat our enemies. That's what he said. Now, that definitely shows, John, that they are thinking about this. But I will tell you, Netanyahu is definitely thinking about that. But I want to tell you something. The first prime minister of Israel, David Ben-Gurion, who was a non-religious, essentially, I won't say atheist, but he definitely, because he famously said, if you don't believe in miracles, in Israel, that's all we have are miracles, essentially is what he said. It's pretty powerful. But even he saw it through the lens of the Bible. So when you saw, I showed you Yigal Yadin, who was friends with, or I don't know if, I can't remember whether he was always friends with Ben-Gurion or not, but he was part of that circle. They all understood that there was a biblical component to what they were doing. And even the ones that weren't religious understood that these words informed them and made them think about what they were doing. Because in some cases, again, not religious, not necessarily, believers or followers of Jewish tradition, but they did understand what they were doing was putting these words back into, they knew the words of the Bible, and they still do. The difference, of course, today is that there's more religious, observant people that are now making the decision. So that's good and bad. Now, my friends, we read the most famous line of today's text. Oh, wait, we didn't read this. Yeah, read these next couple lines.
And I will encamp in my house against armies, against any that come and go, and no oppressor shall ever overrun them again, for I have now taken note with my own eyes.
Yeah.
Rejoice greatly, fair Zion. Raise a shout, fair Jerusalem. Lo, your king is coming to you. He is victorious, triumphant, yet humble, riding on a donkey, on a jackass, foaled by a jenny.
So why is this important, my friends?
Because Jesus entered Jerusalem on a donkey.
Yeah. And this is a critical,
That's a doublet, and they think he had to come on both the donkey and the jack.
yes. So the question is, what does Jesus actually ride in on? But what he rides in on is very important. It ain't a majestic horse. It's got to be something lowly. I'll show you what I'm talking about, because every depiction of Jesus coming into Jerusalem, do you ever wonder why every picture of Jesus has him on a donkey?
Wait a second, I haven't seen.
Wait, do you see this right here?
Any reference to Jesus?
Of course you don't, but that's not the issue. Yeah, but he's not. That's the point. He's the Messiah comes into Jerusalem on a donkey. By the way, did Jesus ride into Jerusalem like this? Right? Because it says he's riding on two donkeys. So is he riding on a donkey? Is he riding on it? So the whole point of this, obviously, is that, and again, you have pictures of this throughout history. I mean, these are modern. Well, this one's not that modern, but you have pictures throughout history of Jesus coming in on a donkey. It's critical. It's critical for this idea of Jesus's humility, and again, falling in line with what Zechariah says. So if you look at it, I mean, this is a major issue within for Christianity. This idea of Jesus fulfilling this prophecy is critical for them. So did Jesus do it? Did the writer of the gospel want us to know that Jesus fulfilled the prophecy? Who knows? Did Jesus ever actually ride into Jerusalem? We don't know. But the reason that the story exists is because of this line from Zechariah chapter 9. It only exists to some extent because of this, because Jesus had to do this. What's interesting is, again, that he comes in victorious and triumphant, but riding a donkey, because that's not what a victorious king would come riding in on. So the juxtaposition of a simple animal being the animal and a work animal, and essentially, again, not a magnificent stallion. It's meant to teach us that our Messiah is not going to have all the bells and whistles and all the accoutrement of a battle warrior king. Now, again, the words are still used there, right? They're still used as this is a king that is coming in triumphant, but he's coming in triumphant on a donkey. So the equivalent, the modern day equivalent is the guy's riding in a beat up Toyota Corolla
But victorious and triumphant over what?
over.
And I will encamp in my house of enemies.
What's the translation that you have in Mary in your? Lo, your king is coming to you. What does it say? In the King James? Yeah. And then it says he is. Yeah. So victorious and triumphant are not wonderful translations.
Oh,
Tzaddik v'nosah are the words. Victorious, it seems to be a little maybe implied, because that's kind of what it's supposed to be. It's supposed to be kind of a ridiculous juxtaposition of. So they translated tzaddik, which is usually translated as righteous, and they translated as that as victorious, which I'm really sure of. But nosah has as its root the word Yeshua, which means salvation, right? Saving. So the point is that maybe not victorious and triumphant, but coming in to do business, right? Coming in to help to get the job done. This is what your king is doing. Your king. Now, again, it doesn't say literally the Messiah, but the assumption is whatever it is he's the next ruler. So people should be happy. Now, what's interesting about it is that Jesus's entry into Jerusalem seems like a strange story. Why? Because it doesn't make sense that a guy who is the rabbi for a group of disciples ends up coming into Jerusalem with a lot of fanfare. The Christian Bible goes out of its way to say that this happened, which leads a lot of people to believe, including Christian scholars, to believe that it didn't happen. It doesn't really make sense. Did Jesus have so many followers in Jerusalem at the time that people would have come out and greeted him? Well, it would if the expectation was that he was going to be the Messiah. But we don't know that he felt he was supposed to be the Messiah. So the whole story seems a little bit forced. It seems a little bit nonsensical in the sense that if Jesus finally now says, as he comes in for Passover, that I am indeed the Messiah, then he's definitely making that statement. Look, I mean, you can go watch Jesus Christ Superstar and see this scene play out in that. We don't really know what to make out of it. And again, it's not my issue, so I don't want to dwell on it, but I do want you to understand that this is radically important for Christians and to understand Jesus' entry into Jerusalem. Jesus' entry into Jerusalem is to make this happen. It's to make Zechariah happen. Why? Because the king was supposed to do this. The king doesn't seem to do this, or maybe the king that we just read about before, Zerubbabel, maybe he does this, but if he does it, it's a very low-key entrance, and it doesn't seem like it really happened. But Jesus making it happen would definitely have been a big issue. And again, there's this contrast between the excitement of having this guy come in, but he comes in humble. He comes in a humble way on a donkey. So again, is it two animals? Is it because these are different animals that are mentioned.
It's a donkey or a mule.
Yeah. So it's different animals, but you could say either one, right? He's going to come on, like, it could be translated as he's humble, because that's really important. He's humble. But it also could be translated as, what is yours? Does yours actually say humble? Lowly. Yeah. Oni means poor. It's also the word we use for poor. He's an oni. He's not wealthy. Right? We call the matzah that we just ate, right? We call it lechem oni, the bread of poverty. Poor person's food.
There you go. Gluten-free, it's good stuff.
Lechem oni. I don't know. It's not what you necessarily, it's not your first choice usually for bread. Maybe for you, John, it is.
Gluten-free stuff.
Okay. So this is not somebody you'd expect to be the king. That's one of the most important ideas, is that he's not coming in with the wealth and the attention that you think.
It doesn't say that. So
What?
It's just being.
Well, it doesn't say humble. It doesn't say humble. It says hu oni. It says he is a lowly. I don't mind the lowly translation, but he's poor. I mean, it could also be he's poor. He comes in on a donkey because he's poor. So humble's close. I'm okay with that. The victorious and triumphant, I'm not as okay with, because I don't really think that. I think that's actually saying, well, that's what Jesus did, but I'm not sure that it's even other than what he said is he's coming in as righteous salvation, for righteousness and salvation. But again, it does say at the beginning, raise a shout, be excited. But it also could be excited because you're not really excited. Be excited because this isn't really that exciting of a scene, but this is the way it's happening. And so you could make the argument that Zechariah is really telling people, be really happy, because what you're going to see isn't going to be a big scene. It's not going to be a spectacle. You know, be happy, be excited, because what is happening is not what you thought would happen. What's going to go down is a scene that looks very normal. A guy's riding a donkey as he comes in. That's the way he comes in. So lower your expectations in the sense of what you're going to see, but it definitely is something to celebrate. And that is, again, a weird idea, but it's one that it's kind of a beautiful idea. Let's take a look. This is what he's going to do.
He shall banish chariots from Ephraim and horses from Jerusalem. The warrior's bow shall be banished. He shall call on the nations to surrender, and his rule shall extend from sea to sea and from ocean to land's end.
Yeah, so you can see what he's going to do is he's going to create a situation where Israel's not going to be occupied anymore. Yeah, he's kicking out all the other nations. He's kicking them out. Right? He's going to have, it's going to be land free.
You, for your part, have released your prisoners from the dry pit for the sake of the blood of your covenant, saying, return to Bizaron, you prisoners of hope. In return, I announce this day, I will repay you double.
Yeah, so it doesn't sound like bizarro world. It's bizarre, Bitzaron. It could be, again, a nickname for Shomron, which is a Bitzaron is a fortress. So you can go back to Samaria, which was a fortress at one time. It was the fortress of the Israel kingdom, the kingdom of the north, the northern kingdom. You can go back there, right? You can go back to that fortress, right? I'm taking you out of the pit. And you're going to go up. Because here's other places where you're going to come from.
For I have drawn Judah taut and applied my hand to Ephraim as to a bow. And I will arouse your sons, O Zion, against your sons, O Javan, and make you like a warrior sword.
Yeah, now this is an interesting line. Because why did these people just get roped into it? This is a very interesting indication that Zechariah knows what's going on. Because remember, he's writing this about 500. And the people around Israel at the time are Philistines, Egyptians, Persians. You know, we said the Phoenicians, people in the north. But this Zechariah just said, what about Yavon? And you know what Yavon is, right? Rosemary, what's Yavon?
You know, I don't know what Yvonne is.
Well, I will tell you,
This is Greece.
it is. Mary just said they didn't use the Hebrew, which is Yavon. They used Greece. What is Yavon? It's the root of, the Hebrew version of Ionia, which was one of the ancient Greek kingdoms. The Ionians, which for us was Greece. There was no Greece. We didn't call it Greece yet. We called it Ionia, and we call those places Athens or Sparta or Ionia. No, they weren't here. So that's what's so interesting about this is that Zechariah already sees them as an up and coming nation that we're going to have to deal with. And sure enough, we did. Because Alexander the Great will eventually come over in about 150 years and make Israel part of the Greek Empire. So this was pretty amazing that
500 years later.
no, not 500. This is 150 years before. So the Greeks at this point are Socrates, the rise of Athens, Sparta, right? They're under, by the way, the Greeks at this point are under Persian. Persians had come all the way over and were messing with Greece. They had made them subject, parts of Greece were subject nations, right? This is before the Peloponnesian War. The 300, right? The 300, this is around that time, a little bit before that. But the Greeks were no match for the Persians. And so the fact that Zechariah sees beyond the Persians to the Greeks, pretty amazing.
The Greeks weren't with us long.
They were with us for about 200 years. So about 330 to about 150. The Maccabees, remember, fought against those Greeks, the descendants of them, between the Ptolemies and the Seleucid dynasty, the ones in Greece and the Greek Syrians and the Greek Egyptians, those Greeks down there and the Greeks up there. Israel was kind of caught in the middle. They were under both. And then under the Maccabees, they fought against them. And then, of course, the Romans took over. The Romans were able to conquer all those areas that were these Greek kingdoms of the descendants of Alexander. Because remember, when Alexander died, his kingdom was split up into 12 kingdoms, and those kingdoms all fought each other constantly. They're always fighting each other, but they were all Greek. They were all Greek descendants of Greeks, right? Like the most famous one of those Greek Egyptians was Cleopatra, right? She was Greek. She wasn't Egyptian. Yeah, she was Greek. She was from the Ptolemy dynasty, right? She was the 7th Cleopatra. So they had been in power for about 200 years, the Greeks. So Zechariah sees beyond the Persians to the Greeks. That's pretty wild. And again, that's a lot of foresight because this wasn't 150 years before. This is 500, he's saying this. Greeks are about 150 years later. But he sees it. He sees it. He sees that it's happening.
And God will be made manifest to Judah with arrows that flash like lightning. My sovereign God shall sound the ram's horn and advance in a stormy tempest. God of hosts will protect them with sling stones that devour and conquer. They shall drink, shall rage as with wine, and be filled with it like a dashing bowl, like the corners of an altar. The eternal their God shall make them prosper on that day, pasturing this covenanted people like sheep. They shall be like crown jewels glittering on God's soil. How lovely, how beautiful they shall be, producing young men like new grain, young women like new wine.
So you can understand, my friends, how when the Jews of the Maccabean period, again, about 350 years after this, about the 150s, right? They're fighting against the Greeks. And you're wondering what inspired them? Right here. Zechariah. I would say by that point, we don't really use the word Hebrew at all, or Israelite. We call them Judeans.
How long
They're
after-
Jews.
How long after Joseph?
How long after Joseph is this? So this is about 800 years after Joseph. 900 years.
Still the pits.
Well, 900 years.
Think about the pits.
900 years. About, yeah, it's a good 1,000 years after Joseph. So there are imagery, there's definitely imagery, John, from pits and from the visions, right? When Joseph talks about his dreams or interprets the Pharaoh's dreams, new grain, wine, I mean, yeah, these are some of the same imagery that people would have from Joseph's dreams. Absolutely. Popping up in Zechariah. Yeah. But he believes that the Jews will be able to fight against the Greeks, right? So you can understand that these people who were fighting during the time of Judah Maccabee, are you kidding me? They totally thought that this was going to happen, right? So we're going to read one more chapter today, chapter 10. This is going to, actually, I think, yeah, we'll read this chapter. It's kind of a shorter chapter. It's about 12 verses. This is the chapter of again, continuing what Zechariah hopes will happen for the people when they return. Okay.
Ask God for rain in the season of late rain. It is God who causes storms, providing rainstorms for them, grass in the fields for everyone. For the oracle idols spoke delusion, the augurs predicted falsely, and dreamers speak lies and console with illusions. That is why my people have strayed like a flock. They suffer for lack of a shepherd.
So they have bad leadership, and that's why they've suffered. The people have listened to, they have bad sources. They have magicians that they've been looking at. They have diviners and weird, weird rituals that they're using to figure out what they're supposed to do. That's who they've been listening to. Yeah.
My anger is roused against the shepherds, and I will punish the he-goats. For God of hosts has taken thought in behalf of the flock, the house of Judah. They will be made like majestic chargers in battle.
Yeah, and what's interesting about that translation, and that's what it says. He says they've been like sheep who haven't had a good shepherd. So they're like sheep, right? So not only am I going to get them a better shepherd, but forget that. Throw out that metaphor. I'm going to make them like war horses. And that's the word that's used. Susim, right? Sus, hodo, bamilchama. These are war horses. I'm not going to make them sheep anymore. I want to make them war horses. Yeah, majestic, big horses, right? Going into battle. That's what I'm going to do. So there's a lot of animals used here. The he-goats, that's the translation that they used here for, again, the bad leaders. Forget those bad leaders. Forget the sheep that they were. They're going to be war horses.
From them shall come cornerstones, from them tent pegs, from them bows of combat, and every captain shall also arise from them. And together they shall be like warriors in battle, trampling in the dirt of the streets. They shall fight, for God shall be with them, and they shall put cavalry to shame. I will give victory to the house of Judah and triumph to the house of Joseph. I will restore them, for I have pardoned them, and they shall be as though I had never disowned them. For I, the Eternal One, am their God, and I will answer their prayers.
Wow. So you can see this is a promise of vindication, right? This is going to be the vindication.
Ephraim shall be like a warrior, and they shall exult as with wine. Their children shall see it and rejoice. They shall exult in God. I will whistle to them and gather them, for I will redeem them. They shall increase and continue increasing. For though I sowed them among the nations, in the distant places they shall remember me. They shall escape with their children and shall return.
Wow. And that is definitely what it felt like for us over the generations. And again, not over 70 years, but over 2,000 years. In all the distant places that we lived, they shall remember me. Who would have thought the Jewish people didn't disappear? Yeah. And they shall escape, they shall come back, right? They shall return. It's exactly what it says and what it will happen. And where will they come back from? Well, back in those days, this is what it meant.
I will bring them back from the land of Egypt and gather them from Assyria, and I will bring them to the lands of Gilead and Lebanon, and even they shall not suffice for them. A hemmed-in force shall pass over the sea, and shall stir up waves in the sea, and all the deeps of the Nile shall dry up. Down shall come the pride of Assyria, and the scepter of Egypt shall pass away. But I will make Judah and Ephraim mighty through God, and they shall march proudly in my name, declares God.
Yeah, so they're going to have parts of the land that were always kind of contested, kind of far north, right? I'm going to put them in Gilead and Lebanon, right? They're going to be up in the Golan Heights and all the way across into Lebanon. That's all going to be parts that we're going to live in, right? But that's not enough, right? It's not enough because I'm going to punish the Egyptians and the Assyrians. And on the other hand, I'm going to make these guys my children, the nations of Judah and Israel. Those are going to be once again strong. Now, again, both of them, Judah and Ephraim, are both named, right? You can say that again, these are doesn't say actually Judah and Ephraim here. It just says, I will make them. But again, we assume that we're talking about what they talked about here, which is Judah and Joseph. I don't know. He could have said Judah and Joseph, but it doesn't matter. I mean, it's Ephraim. The next chapter is a little bit longer. I don't know if we'll start it before we get it. The next chapter, this chapter is really short. This chapter is only 9 verses. So the next week we'll finish Zechariah. We have the last. We'll be in person next week. Yeah. And it's your anniversary. That's right. Anniversary.
We'll be here.
And you'll be celebrating your anniversary with us.
You go to a trophy shop. You go to a trophy shop. Is your wife deserves a trophy?
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. John he deserves a trophy. We should get Mary a trophy. The Living with Mike trophy. She's the only recipient. No, we love Mike, and she definitely deserves a trophy. No, no, she does. She's an amazing lady, so she deserves a trophy for lots of reasons. But so folks, for the rest of the day, look, we definitely have had some stuff to think about. Thinking about Israel today, it was a perfect text for us to read today. Yeah, yeah. I don't know. I haven't heard what's. Well, wait, that's not true. There's a concert at Valley Beth Shalom. What was that last night? No, that was Congregation Beth Shalom had a party on Friday night. Yeah, that was Congregation Beth Shalom. I'm talking about Valley Beth Shalom. I think they're doing something tonight, a concert. What are they doing? I thought they were doing a concert. Let me just find out. It's a great question, John. Great question. What is going on tonight? It's a very different landscape because a lot of synagogues didn't want to do stuff in person because they didn't want to have this stuff happen. No.
These days at television.
Phil Barron. who was out here for a minute. He was a really nice guy. But Herschel Fox is still there. Yeah, he's still like emeritus. Yeah, he's emeritus, but he still does stuff there. Wait, I'm going to tell you. Let me just tell you, when is this one? Look, I mean, look, we don't have the resources to put on the kind of stuff that they do here, but at Valley Beth Shalom. No, they did theirs Monday night. They had something there. There was a concert, a festival of cantors. It didn't sound that interesting, but yeah, he wanted to the rabbi there now wanted me to I don't know what he wanted me to do. He actually wanted me to film it for JLTV, I think. Yeah. Yeah, he wanted to have a 2-hour program. Yeah, well, younger, like he's my age. I don't think that's young, but so folks, everybody have a great rest of the day. You know, we could definitely be praying for Israel, that's for sure. That's all something we could do, and pray for our kids that are hopefully going to finish out the school year in safety. So thanks everybody for being here. Tomorrow night we'll be virtual. I'll be coming to you, God willing, from the JCC. Yes, we're virtual tomorrow night. I said no. Oh. Well, I was going to do it from there just as a point. But okay, so yeah, no, it didn't. Should have said online only. All right. Well, I'll send out an email. We won't do it then tomorrow night, but yeah, pray for my safety, I guess. So, John, but listen, guys, no one can bring a gun. Well, actually, I'm not sure that JCC, I think, has a sign as it comes in. It says you can't bring your gun in here. Yeah. Anyways, I don't think they can get in anyways. All right. But yeah, there are signs in Arizona where it says you can't bring a gun because otherwise you can.
Mike's right.
You can.
It says in person and online.
Yeah, it should have said online. I decided I was going to try to do it online, but yeah, probably it's better for me not to. And as I said, I had no idea last week when I said that they were going to have this counter protest, but I'm flying, but I'm going to be driving once I'm there. All right, everybody. Happy Yom Ha'atzmaut under the circumstances, everybody. And we'll see you definitely in person though, and online next week. Take care, everybody. And come to services.
Thank you, Rabbi.
We have special music. Yeah. Yes.
Wait.
Yes. And dine out for TBA Thursday night. We'll remind people again, but Handles and Mod Pizza. It's going to be wonderful. And John needs suggestions for June, July, and August. So send it to him. All right. Thank you, everybody.